Hi all, I'm going to touch on Hang Seng Tech rebound. Is it for real? Has the bottom passed? And what can we do now? Appreciate a like if you like this video and do subscribe to my YouTube channel. I recently covered the Hang Seng Tech and I asked whether a tech rebound is for real. So this is the Hang Seng Tech index where you see from February peak at 10,945 points, it came down all the way to around 5,800 before rebounding to around 6,700 plus points. But it's still down by around 4,200 points. You see the critical price points that I mentioned is still above 6,600 points that I recently mentioned on the recent Friday. As of Friday, it's up 1.78% and closed at 6,754 points with a range of 6,600 plus to 6,784. The question now then is, will the US equities correction or crash, if any, kill the rebound? That's a question that you also have to think through. So what's my view? My view is that I'm still optimistic that the Hang Seng Tech has rebounded. And what will I do? I will buy selectively good Chinese tech equities if any of these equities that isolated retrace back to a certain price point that I like. But what about those individuals who don't know how to choose stocks? Stock selection, no to them. But if one doesn't want company-specific risk, then what do you want to do? You only want sector exposure? And what can you consider? What about ETF? Have you thought about it? What's that? Exchange traded funds. And what are some of the ETF that are similar to Hang Seng Tech Index? iShares Hang Seng Tech ETF, which is having a ticker code of 3067 Hong Kong, and Lion OCBC Hang Seng Tech ETF, item 1, 3067 HK, is a product by BlackRock with a management fee of around 0.25% of NAV that's calculated on daily basis. And this ETF will invest in securities primarily in the underlying index, which is Hang Seng Tech Index that I've been talking about since the beginning of this presentation. And you know that for Hang Seng Tech Index, it's actually a net total return index, which means that it's being computed based on the basis that dividends net of tax are reinvested. And the distribution policy is on a semi-annual basis. Remember this because I'm going to compare that to the Lion OCBC Hang Seng Tech ETF. And what's the investment strategy of 3067 Hong Kong? Using a strategy of representative sampling investment strategy. What about HST, the product by Lion OCBC? One thing to note is that the management fee is around 0.45%. And the underlying index is Hang Seng Tech Index. And what's the dividend policy? Currently, there's no intention, as per mentioned in the prospectus, that no intention for it to distribute any dividend. And expense ratio, which is different from management fee, that will include other expenses at the fund itself, will be capped at 0.68%. For something that I'm not exactly sure in terms of the expense ratio at BlackRock, you have to go and research more, is that you need to go and find out what the other expenses as a percentage of the NAV, then you can compare these two. But for Lion OCBC, the expense ratio is 0.68% per annum and is kept at that level for the first 2 years. Well, beyond that, this number could be even higher or lower. That I wouldn't know. For investment strategy, is currently adopting a direct replication strategy, but may also adopt representative sampling strategy that BlackRock is using. So what are the investment strategies about? Here we go. Something that we must take note is the leverage, which for the BlackRock ETF, it actually have a potential exposure of up to 50% of its NAV. For the HST, I didn't see it in the prospectus. Remember this, leverage cuts both sides. It can enhance your return, or it can magnify your loss. Think through. What's the fund size of BlackRock ETF? It's around 1.6 billion SGD. As for the Hang Seng Tech ETF that OCBC is doing, it's around 300 million SGD right now. And transaction fees for these two. I'm going to show you the Hang Seng Tech ETF by BlackRock. This is the share price chart. It's been down, by around 38.5% from year high, but it's still up 70% from this year low. What is the investment objective of this ETF? Like what BlackRock mentioned in the prospectus, aims to provide investment results before fees and expenses that closely correlate to the Hang Seng Tech. Here's the share price relative performance of the two ETFs that I mentioned, the one by OCBC and the one by BlackRock. In fact, you see the HST in blue and the red one being the BlackRock ETF. Very closely mapping each other year to date. For one to consider these two ETF, you have to consider the sector risk, volatility of these two ETF, as well as the regulatory risk, as well as the expense ratio, forex risk, and transaction fees for different exchanges. These are the things that you have to think through. And ultimately, the number one question is Hang Seng Tech Index an instrument that you think is a worthwhile index for you to invest into? As always, this should not be construed as any investment or trading advice. Do stay tuned and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that I can be kept updated only when I release new videos to reflect the changing market conditions